Yeah, I mean, if you're a content creator, this is so important to you because, comedians are just like our canary in the mine, our dog in the fight. They don't have any special advantages or position than any of the rest of us. So what happens to them gives us a sense of what's going to happen to us, how freely you can swing your arms in the area of free speech.
Welcome to the Marketing Expedition Podcast, an auditory journey through the latest in marketing, branding, and advertising. Now, here's your Marketing Expedition guide, Ray Allen.
On this episode of the Marketing Expedition Podcast, we are going to talk about jokes. There may be far worse things for comedians or comedy actors to worry about than having a string of jokes that bomb. Just ask people like Dave Chappelle, Conan O'Brien, Howard Stern, Adam Carolla, Charlie Sheen, Jimmy Kimmel, John Oliver, Jay Leno, and a host of others. But what they should be concerned about are the details that keep them out of the courtroom, especially in a country that is litigious as we are in the United States. Carl Unegbu, considered the foremost authority on comedy and the law, has written an entire book using these comedy legends and others as cautionary tales that help comedians become aware of ways to avert lawsuits and legal entanglements. Carl is a New York attorney, longtime editor of Comedy Beat website, and the writer of a highly read blog called Carl's Law, focusing on the intersection between comedy and law. And Carl also hosted a quarterly forum in Manhattan called Comedy Dialogue, which regularly served up a great combo of stand-up comedy performances and panel discussions. Carl's new book, Comedy Goes to Court, When People Stop Laughing and Start Fighting, ensures that people who work in the comedy arena take the smart steps to prevent the disagreements, contractual missteps, on and off the stage, and the behavior that can result in expensive lawsuits. He directly addresses how far you can go and have the First Amendment protect you. There's a lot of lessons here for anyone in the entertainment business, and not just comedians or comedy actors. And even if you aren't trying to make a living telling jokes, you'll find these fascinating stories revealing about how our society and the world works. And his book has been described as a must-read for comedians and a should-read for all of us who are not trying to make a living at jokes, right? But all of us can learn from these little stories that he has to share with us. So we'll get to that and we'll welcome Carl here in a moment. But now it's time for your marketing essentials moment, the basics that you need to help you continue to build your brand and your bottom line. On today's topic, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about how to market an event such as a comedy show or open mic night or some sort of performance that you want butts and seats to come attend, right? So a couple things to come to mind. Give the performers incentive to help you market the show individually. So for example, they can have a promo code that's specific to them that they can offer to their friends and family. Maybe you can have the audience vote on their favorite guest or their performer. You can then offer a prize to the favorite who gets the most votes. That also could help put out the word about the fact that they're going to be performing at your venue or if your event or whoever it is that you're trying to promote and get. And also think about the opportunities to continuously build this. If you have a regular ongoing show at the regular same time, how they can have opportunities to come back to the next show if they do vote, or if they do use a promo code or any of those types of things to keep them coming back and not just to see their favorite performer. And if you're in a small town or a smaller town, try using the local radio station to do a pre-interview of the performer. And that way they get a little taste of who they are, what they're all about. The interviewee and interviewer can share a little bit more about the show and talk about ways to get tickets to that show. And again, using a promo code for that radio station so you can track it, measure it. Where you get that information from is invaluable because then you'll want to repeat doing the same things that work every time. And if you can track where you're getting your tickets purchased from, then you're going to want to keep doing those tactics that continuously work for you. Then also make sure that you can give your show a unique name. That way, it'll appear in Google searches when people are trying to search for it. It'll help with your SEO. Also, give it some sort of tagline that's going to help with search engine phrasing, continuously thinking about ways that you can uniquely identify the show name or the shows or the headliner or something of that nature so that when people are searching for it, it will come up to the top of the search query. And also making sure that the marketing that you're putting out there, whether you're doing community calendar links to where people can then see the show on a community calendar or something of that nature, usually newspapers will have it, local periodicals will have them. There are calendar event sites that just specifically just do calendaring, and you can promote them on those sites as well. But make sure that you describe what exactly your show is and why it's unique and why people should care. Just the word improv won't sell tickets on its own. You've got to give some more information so that people are enticed to want to come and why they should care and why should they should show up. Why should they even be there? And if you do have that consistent show on a repeat, regular, ongoing basis, you have to play the long game to continuously build your audience, but always giving them incentive to come back and then tell other people about it, giving them incentives to then get some sort of prize or referral or whatever the case might be so that they continuously want to show up at your venue. And of course, if you can tap into your email database and the performer's email database, then you're doing yourselves all a good favor to help cross promote and share. If you have sponsors of the event, make sure that they have a promo code to use for their audience as well. And all of these things can help build up because you're cross promoting and having multiple people email, put it on their socials, put it on the website, on their calendars, whatever the case is that you can do to continuously build momentum, because people will come back if they like it. If they have a great experience, they're going to continuously want to come back and promote the show for you, right? Word of mouth advertising. How can you accelerate those word of mouth tactics that will help get people to the show on an ongoing basis, or even if it is a one-time basis? Who can you leverage? What other databases and other people can you invite that then can spur and sprawl that word of mouth advertising, with rewarding those who reward you by giving that message out there to the world? So hopefully that helps in getting some butts in seats. And in the tourism world, we always want heads in beds, right? We want the hotels to be filled, the restaurants to be filled, and all the surrounding areas to get that economic impact by having the shows that you put on. So hopefully that can help. And if you want help with your promoting your show, Peppershock Media is a place to go. We've done lots of event promotions over the years and have definitely identified with what works well and what does not. So give us a call if that's something that you would like help with, or just to brainstorm ideas. You can always find me on all the socials, Ray Allen, RHEAALLEN, and connect with me. How can I help? How can we help? Now it's time to get into our interview. Welcome to this episode of the Marketing Expedition podcast. I'm your host, Ray Allen, and I'm the president and CEO of Peppershock Media and the founder of the Marketing Expedition community. And today's guest, we have Carl Unegbu on the show with us. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Well, let's just start off with a bit of background, even more than what your bio would state. Just tell us more about you and how you got to where you are, and being a lawyer in New York City, all the wonderful things. Share away.
First of all, I appreciate being on this forum to talk about this book. A book is called Comedy Goes to Court, when people stop laughing and start fighting. So, with respect to who I am, so I live here in Manhattan. I am a lawyer and a journalist, and now I am an author of a second book in comedy. I started this book. I mean, I did not intend to like write this book
Mhm.
in this way because the book started out more like as a blog that I was writing
Mhm.
as part of our work running a
Mhm.
website, a comedy news website called Comedy Beat. which I was doing with some former colleagues of mine who were students at Columbia, where I went to
The
school.
comedy
I
beats.
studied
Yeah.
journalism at Columbia.
Yeah.
So some of my former schoolmates at the journalism school, they, they came up. Some of them somehow this idea came up that we should found this website that covers comedy, like do it as a news operation. So that's how we began to talk about comedy. The website was called Comedy Beat. And, I had been to comedy shows, lots of shows. Sometimes, I mean, I even like participated in some open mics
Mm-hmm.
in the past. So, I mean, but I didn't do that because I wanted to become a professional comedian. No, I mean, I did this, I did that because, just for the hell of it,
Entertainment.
I liked
The
comedy.
entertainment value
Yeah,
of comedy.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So yeah. So for that reason, before we started to cover comedy from a news operation perspective, I was already like somebody who liked the art form and had dabbled into it. So
Hmm.
it was fun to have to cover the industry here, especially in New York. I mean, what better place to
Yeah.
do that kind of work than in New York, the media capital of the world, with lots of comedy products and comedy venues and things of that nature. So we did that, and then as part of that operation, I was writing a blog on the side, Ocas Law, a blog that talked about things happening to comedians
Mm.
that have some relevance with the law. Maybe comedians got sued or got in trouble or maybe got arrested or
Mm.
so yeah. So that was what that blog was about, covering that kind of uh, those kinds of issues, that kind of subject.
Hmm.
So this book eventually came out of the blog. After I mean, I had done that blog for over 10
Oh,
years
wow.
at that point, and then some friends, some people that I ran into, suggested to me to. So why don't you like? They said, well, why don't you like? This blog is so nice, and
Hmm.
people love it. Why don't you like really write a book like everybody else, and like really
Sure.
put this thing together
Yeah.
in a form that people can access the thing at a place.
Yeah.
So I started to think about it, and this conversation happened during one of the events from a show I used to host. I used to co-host in Manhattan. It was called Comedy Dialogue. It was a quarterly series that we hosted here, where we start off with a have comedians, perform, their skits for like maybe 10 minutes. We bring maybe like 4 or 5 comedians to perform, and then after they perform, then we sit down uh, on a panel and talk about the issues of the day, that kind of thing. So that was what comedy dialogue was. And then before that, before we even have the comedy performances, we'd have like a wine and cheese reception.
Mm.
And then after the performances and the panel conversation, we'd have again more wine and cheese. So it was during one of these wine and cheese talk interactions that people then mentioned to me, hey, by the way, I was thinking, why don't you like, I mean, these issues you guys are talking about and some of the things you were discussing on this panel, so these are really live wire issues.
Hmm.
Why don't you maybe, consider writing a book from your blog? So again, that was how the whole idea began.
Mm.
And that was how the journey from blog to book went down.
Right. Well,
So here we are, and there's a book out there, Comedy Goes to Court, when people stop laughing and start fighting. Now, what's interesting is the book contains only maybe 25% at most of the stuff on the blog.
mm.
So it's not every, you can, to read the blog and to read the book, these are two separate things, not the same thing.
Hmm.
But, the subjects are related, but they are by no means the same.
Hmm.
And so the way I divided up the book, I meant the book as an entertainment one for non-comedians.
Right.
It's got lots of wonderful, titillating stories that are so fascinating. You know,
Hmm.
about what comedians were doing before they got in trouble with the law. Their adventures and shenanigans and
Hmm.
tricks and things like that. And then, uh, and then it's written. The book is written in a very simple style, the kind of easy, accessible language that you could see in, say, People magazine or the world famous page 6 of the New York Post. And so I didn't write the book like lawyers would write things. When lawyers write,
Yeah.
you can obviously know that lawyers are writing because it's full of mumbo jumbo, legalese,
Yeah.
and jargons and citations. No,
So you made
from
it
the
easy
get go,
for the layman's in layman's terms for people to actually understand what you're saying, which is
exactly.
good.
And why could I do that? I could do that because I was a
Mm,
journalist. I had a training as a journalist.
nice.
And journalists write different from lawyers because journalists write for general audiences.
Hmm.
You write in a way that if you're writing for a magazine or a newspaper, you write it for, the guy who rides the subway or a cab driver or the guy watching a baseball game. You write for everyday people if you're a journalist.
Hmm.
When lawyers write for other lawyers. They write for judges, they write for appellate brief, those
Hmm.
kinds of things. So lawyers write differently. So I could only write this book that stands at the intersection of law and comedy because I had a background as a journalist. We are
Yeah.
storytellers by nature.
Yeah.
So that was how I was able to write this book in very simple language. The kind of language people could see in People magazine or, again, like I said, the New York Post, not
Hmm.
the kind of language they could see in a law review article, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that's how that happened. And so because it's written in such a simple language, when people pick up this book, I want them to sort of feel like maybe they are watching a show on Comedy Central or, you know, uh, maybe a Netflix comedy special or a roast, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So it becomes a book they could read on vacation, on a couch, or any place where they like to read. So that's number one. The other reason I wrote the book was uh, for a more serious reason, other than just entertainment. To kind of teach people about uh, where the First Amendment, free speech, is today in America. You
Hmm.
know, I noticed that comedians now have become people at the front lines of the protection of free speech. And why comedians, you might ask? Why comedians, you might ask? Well, simple answer is comedians talk for a living and they fly closest to the sun because, they make fun of things
Hmm.
that people feel vulnerable
Or they
about.
might have
Maybe something about,
parodies, or they might have
yeah,
jokes that.
about something about
Mhm,
race,
mhm,
maybe rape jokes, transgender jokes, anti-Semitic, all sorts of stuff that people feel vulnerable about. And comedians like to mine these subjects for jokes.
right.
So because they fly closest to the sun, they run the risk of offending people.
Mhm,
And when they offend people, they get sued or they get in trouble. And then we are able to know the contours of the First Amendment and free speech. In other words, how far can we go? Even though we have free speech in this country, how far can we go before we get in trouble?
mhm,
So comedians and their adventures and their interactions and conflicts with the society itself, the cancel culture people and everybody else, so their confrontations give us a chance to know what we can or cannot get away with when it comes to free speech.
right.
And the reason is simple that we, comedians just like us, we have the same rights as comedians. Comedians don't have more rights than any of the rest of us when it comes to free speech and the First Amendment. So what happens to them becomes a dry run for what can happen to us.
Mhm,
In other
mhm.
words, how much free speech do we still have in contemporary times when uh, there's too much sensitivity about wokeness and cancel culture and things of that nature? So, so that's the other reason I wrote the book.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say content creators and other producers and people, not just comedians, can also be held accountable. And yeah,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
also,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a line to walk with the First Amendment where you have the freedom of speech, but how far can you go? Not get sued for, libel, slander, all of the things that are worrisome to people telling those jokes or telling those stories, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a content creator, this is so important to you because, comedians are just like our canary in the mine, our dog in the fight. They don't have any special advantages or position than any of the rest of us. So what happens to them gives us a sense of what's going to happen to us, how freely you can swing your arms in the area of free speech. And so the free speech chapter in this book is the biggest chapter in the book. And, as one might guess, that's where the title of the book comes from,
Hmm.
when people stop laughing and start fighting.
Right.
And I have stories here about people like Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, Jimmy Kimmel,
Yeah.
Jim Norton, Bill Maher, John Oliver, Howard Stern, all these folks, their stories, dramatize the situation with free speech, how they got in trouble, what they could get away with.
Mhm.
I mean, like Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, I tell the story of Jerry Seinfeld here to contrast that with a story from Australia, for
Mm.
instance. I mean, with Jerry Seinfeld, he went on David Letterman's show, and then he talks about some woman who had previously had some lawsuit situation with his wife, with Jerry Seinfeld's wife,
Mm.
over a children's cookbook.
Oh, wow.
So Jerry Seinfeld's wife, she won the lawsuit.
Mm.
Now, Jerry Seinfeld, it was a lawsuit about plagiarism. So Jerry Seinfeld goes on David Letterman, and he brings up this subject about this woman.
Mm.
Then he proceeds to call the woman a wacko, somebody with a three names, that people like that usually end up as assassins and things of that nature, all
Mm.
that stuff. He mentions James O'Reilly and, the guy who killed Martin Luther King Jr., and, Bruce David Mark David Chapman, so those kinds of people. Anyway, so this woman ends up suing Jerry Seinfeld
Mm.
himself. She sues Jerry Seinfeld. She sues David Letterman. She sues CBS. I mean, she sues literally everybody in sight.
She's too happy.
Oh well,
Mm-hmm. She's too
she sued them for defamation.
happy. Yeah.
That Jerry Seinfeld that that he implied that she was an assassin, a wacko. Anyway, but she loses the lawsuit. Jerry Seinfeld
Mm.
wins. The court says, well, look, that's just an opinion by a comedian on a comedy show.
Right.
That first of you have statement of fact, and then you have statement of opinion. Now, to be liable for defamation, you have to have made a statement of fact,
Mm.
which is a statement of fact is a statement that can be shown to be true or false. Like for instance, if you say that it rained yesterday at 4 p.m., well, it either rained or it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
If it rained at 4 p.m., then that's a true statement of
Mm-hmm.
fact. If it didn't rain at 4 p.m., then that's a false statement of fact. So when it comes to defamation, the statement that will get you in trouble is a false statement of fact.
Mm.
So the court said what Jerry Seinfeld said wasn't even a statement of fact. It was just an opinion
Mm.
that he thought she was wacko, all that kind of stuff. Now, people have asked me, well, can comedians ever then be liable for defamation? I say, yeah. There's this case from Australia where a comedian says, that a comedian named of Mick Molloy. So he goes on a comedy, no, he goes on a show,
Mm-hmm.
a football show where people make jokes and things like that. It was called Before the Game.
Mm-hmm.
So he says something about like that there was this woman who was a politician in Australia. I think her name was Nikki Corns. She was a member of parliament, high profile
Ah.
politician. And then this comedian says that she had an affair
Oh.
with a football player on the team of her husband. The woman's husband was a football coach. Then this comedian alleged that she had an affair with the gentleman. Well, it turns out it wasn't true. It was false. So it was a false statement of
Mm.
fact. And the court said, yeah, look, even though you're a comedian and you were saying this thing on a humorous show, but you made a false statement of fact, which damaged her reputation. So he was liable for defamation. So that's where the line is.
Right.
It has to be a false statement of fact. Whether you're a comedian or not, if you cross that line, then you become liable. Anyways, but then I went on to other cases here, Jay Leno and
Mm-hmm.
all these other people. And then one thing I want people to take away from,
Mm-hmm.
part of what I want them to take away from this book is this, that because of the First Amendment, we have a situation here where we have more advantage.
Mm-hmm.
We can say more.
Right.
We can be comedians. We can be content creators freely and say the kinds of things that we could never say in other Western democracies, comparable Western democracies, even like Canada here in the north,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe Australia, Britain, Germany. I mean, I have a case in Canada where I cover in the book where a comedian attacked a kid who was disabled.
Oh.
This kid had what they call Treacher Collins syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of deforms his face. Kind of deforms people's faces and things. And it's such it kind of make people look real, horrific. Anyway, so this kid had that syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of disfigured his face, and then he sort of developed a singing career. He sang with Celine Dion. He sang before the Pope.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So this comedian comes out and says, look, that when this kid started out, that he thought the kid was, attracting sympathy because, he was going to die soon. That now some years have gone by that this kid hasn't died.
Mm-hmm.
That now he thinks that this kid that this was a scam all along, that he wants the kid to die already.
Oh man. Wow.
But it was kind of cruel.
Yeah.
People laughed and everything. But so the kid's family sued him. They filed a complaint against him before the Quebec Human Rights Commission, and they ended up imposing a fine on
Oh
him
wow.
for attacking the dignity of the kid.
Oh.
And then, in America, for instance, to show the difference between America and Canada,
Hmm.
because of the First Amendment, you could never think of suing a comedian for attacking somebody's dignity, for attacking somebody because the person looked ugly and things like that,
Hmm.
because of the First Amendment.
Mm.
So that's the difference there. I mean, and the other case I cover in the book comes from Germany, where some comedian, name of Jan Böhmermann, he attacked the president of Turkey, the Islamic nation of Turkey.
Hmm.
He said that the president Erdogan, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that he had sex with goats and watched child porn, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then the Turkish government was so offended that they say, well, this is not comedy, this is depravity, this is ridiculous, this is
Hmm.
insane. This guy needed to be punished. So they complained to the German government. So for a while there, the whole thing caused some real friction in diplomatic relations between those two countries. And then the German government actually investigated this comedian
Mm.
for, insulting a foreign leader, because in Germany there's a law against doing that kind of thing.
Mm.
But eventually they sort of dropped the lawsuit. And I bring it up because, in America, for instance, you couldn't like attack somebody, a comedian, for insulting a foreign leader or whatever, that kind of thing. You couldn't do that.
Hmm.
And the example I give in this book was a case involving Jay Leno.
Mm.
When Leno tried to, during the campaign of 2012,
Hmm.
he was trying to say how the Republican presidential candidates were so rich and everything. So he was showing their houses, their
Mm.
homes. So when he got to Mitt Romney had this vacation home in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
So when Leno got to that point, instead of showing Mitt Romney's home in New Hampshire, he shows this temple, this majestic temple in India, in Amritsar, India,
Hmm.
that was so of such important spiritual significance to the Sikh community. Anyway, so an Indian guy here in the United States sues Jay Leno, saying, well, this was defamation, it was racism, it was an insult to the Sikh nation
Right.
to
Mm.
associate Mitt Romney, who was not, you know, a member of the Sikh religion, with that kind of important, majestic temple that had such spiritual value and significance to that religion.
Right.
And then the Indian Foreign Ministry complained to the U.S. State Department that this is an insult to the Indian nation, that this guy has to be punished and everything. And then the State Department tells the Indian Foreign Ministry that, look, we don't endorse what Jay Leno said, but because of the First Amendment in our country, comedians and in fact other people are free to say things like that.
Mm.
So that's sort of like the difference that the First Amendment makes in America,
Right.
as opposed to even other countries that have democracies like this one, even Britain.
Hmm. I'm sure I don't need to throw a bunch of statistics and percentages at you for you to know that most of us spend too much time staring at screens. Being able to consume your content on the go means that your clients and customers can listen and learn from you without being tied to their desks. With Hello Audio, your customers can put their phones down, power off their PCs, close their MacBooks, and get the information they need from you while they're, let's say, walking a dog, doing a jigsaw puzzle, washing the dishes, maybe when they're in the car or exercising on the treadmill, sunbathing in their garden. Well, Hello Audio makes it incredibly easy for you. No more hours spent trying to figure out tech settings or trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole. You can click publish on an audio feed in a matter of minutes and have control over who accesses what. So visit peppershock.com/offers and sign up for a free trial of Hello Audio.
I'll give you one more. I mean, in Britain, like in March, I think in April, a new law came into effect. It was called the Hate Crimes Law. That if you attack somebody on the basis of race or ethnicity or religion, you could get in trouble. Again, you don't find those things in this country at all.
Right.
Again, thanks to the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And but then there are issues here when it comes to comedians and the rest of us. Uh, there are people who are not comedians. I mean, comedians are not attacked just by the woke police, the cancel culture people,
Mm-hmm.
they are also attacked by what we call strategic lawsuits,
Mm.
like the one that Donald Trump filed against Bill Maher,
Mm-hmm.
in 2013. 2013, where Bill Maher made a joke about Donald Trump's hair, and Trump sues him for $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the joke was sort of like, if Donald Trump could produce evidence that he wasn't the son of an orange orangutan and a human woman, that Bill Maher, will give him $5 million. And Maher said this thing uh, on Jay Leno's show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the backdrop to that story, the backdrop was when Donald Trump was saying that Barack Obama wasn't born in this country,
Mm.
that if he could bring evidence that he was born in this country, that he would give him $5 million. So that was the backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
So he promised Obama $5 million, and then Bill Maher promised him $5 million in this other case. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, Donald Trump sues Bill Maher, and eventually Bill Maher wins. But
Yeah.
that wasn't the point. The point was to shut up this comedian and make him spend money
Mm.
and go through some serious, difficulty and stress
Litigation. Yeah.
defending this lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a strategic lawsuit.
Hmm.
The same sort of lawsuit I cover in another case here involving John Oliver. When John Oliver was talking about the politics of the Trump administration around coal, the coal industry, as an important source of energy. So John Oliver attacked this company that was owned by this guy Robert Murray, who owned the biggest coal company in this country. This guy was a billionaire
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So there was some argument about what caused an explosion in a mine in Utah in 2007, where 9 people died.
Mm.
So Oliver tried to say it was because this guy was cutting corners with safety regulations and
Cutting
stuff.
corners. Yeah.
But this billionaire was saying no, Robert Murray, he was saying no, what caused the explosion was an earthquake. So there was that kind of controversy. And then Oliver attacked him, said he was the geriatric Dr. Evil, called him all sorts of
Mm.
names. And then this billionaire said, well, look, don't run this episode. If you run this episode that you're planning to run, we are going to sue you for defamation. Well, Oliver comes to his show and said, look, we have been told we are going to get sued for defamation if I run this episode. Well, I'm going to run it anyway. Let him sue me. So he runs the episode.
Mm.
Well, this is a billionaire with money, so he sues Oliver.
Yeah.
But so anyway, eventually Oliver wins the lawsuit because, again, like I said, it's very difficult to
Opinion versus fact.
find a comedian liable for defamation in America, again, because of the First
Mm-hmm.
Amendment. So Oliver wins the lawsuit, but even though he won the lawsuit, he had spent up until that point more than $200,000
Jeez.
on lawyers' fees and court fees and things. Plus, his insurance had gone up by more than 300%. So that was the point. The point wasn't to win. The point for this billionaire was to like shut him up,
Mm-hmm.
like a strategic lawsuit against a comedian. So, these are all challenges when it comes to free speech. But again, usually you win.
Right.
In America, usually you win.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it may cost you money sometimes if you have strategic people going after you,
Right.
some billionaires and things. So, yeah, so that's what happens with that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, I appreciate the stories that you can share because, like you said, we are storytellers, and I love the you can point out the things that people do that maybe they're protected from the First Amendment, but maybe it's not always right. Like it doesn't always feel right, or the outcome doesn't turn out to where people feel good about it, but. Hey, if the First Amendment says that you can, say these things as opinion versus facts or
right.
untrue facts, as you said, then I guess comedians still have a little bit of uh, uh, ability to share their opinions.
They have a lot of ability to share their opinion, and not just them, all the rest of us. Like I said,
Hmm.
comedians are just like our proxy, our dog in the fight.
Hmm. Hmm.
When they get into these fights, we can see ourselves in the comedians.
Hmm.
So if you're a content creator,
Hmm.
so these guys, they kind of like let you know what the boundaries are
Hmm.
in terms of free speech, what you can say and what you cannot say. And from all the cases I have in this book, it tells you that you can say so much in this country and get away with it,
Hmm.
unlike some of the other democracies that we often hear about,
Hmm.
Britain, Canada, Australia, Germany. So
Hmm.
yeah, this is the best country to, I guess, enjoy free speech,
Right.
despite all the challenges of cancel culture and everything.
Right.
So when it comes to the government attacking you for free speech and things, or people who file lawsuits to take you down from, defamation claims, no, in this country, you stand very strong with respect to free speech, unlike some of
Right.
these societies that I have mentioned. I mean, if you live in Britain, there's this comedian named Frankie Boyle who, sued the Daily Mirror, one of the important newspapers in Britain, for calling him a racist. Well, he won the lawsuit over there because the court said, well, that was a false statement of fact that they made about him. If that would have been in this country, because of the First Amendment, he being a public figure,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been more difficult for him to win that kind of lawsuit
Mm.
for defamation. Because in this country, once somebody is a public figure, or you're talking about public affairs, a matter of public interest, to win a defamation lawsuit against that person, you have to show that the person made that false statement intentionally,
Mm.
or that they made that false statement recklessly, meaning they knew that the statement was probably false. They had reason to know it was probably false, and they said it anyway. And this is a very high bar.
Mm-hmm.
So just because the statement you have made is not true in all respects, it doesn't mean that you're liable. Because of the First Amendment, you can make a false statement and still skate free
Mm.
from a defamation claim. Again, in America, because of the First Amendment, the standards are very high.
Well,
If you didn't make the statement intentionally, if you make a false statement intentionally, then you have a problem.
mhm.
But if you didn't make it intentionally, then you're fine because of the First Amendment. As long as we are talking about matters of public interest, let's say matters of racism or political debate or whatever, or if you're dealing with a public figure or a celebrity, let's say Taylor Swift or some other celebrity, that's in America. In Britain and all these other countries, once it's a false statement of fact,
Mm.
whether you made it intentionally or you didn't make it intentionally, you were
Right.
liable for defamation. You understand?
What is your
So,
take on parodies? Like parodies, can be blatantly. I mean, what do you what do you think about parodies?
well, parody is protected under the First Amendment, and parodies can be very cruel. You know, uh, I mean, somebody could parody you in a way that could destroy your career. I mean, if you saw Saturday Night Live, like the 2016 election, no, the 2008
Mhm.
election, how what they did to Sarah Palin
Mm.
on Saturday Night Live. So they parodied her until like they literally made her a caricature, and she became somebody who wasn't taken seriously anymore.
Oh yeah,
And some
like
of
the
those
"I
things
can
they were
see
saying
Russia from my backyard" statement, or
exactly,
yeah, yeah. I remember that.
and yeah, and some of the things that we are saying were just very cruel and very mean spirited. But hey, this is America. Parody is protected
Mhm.
by the First Amendment.
Mhm.
So if it's parody, First Amendment protection, or even copyright infringement, they won't get you there either.
Mm.
If it's copyright infringement, because parody is protected in this
Yeah.
sense. Now, with content creators, I have a section here on defamation, like copyright
Mhm.
infringement. What it takes to, win a lawsuit for copyright infringement or not. So even though many of the cases we are talking about comedians, but the rules are the same. So if you have content creators among your audience, they might want to see this book. The third chapter on copyright infringement talks about those kinds of
Yeah.
things. Again, it really shows you how America stands head and shoulders are more advantageous for content creators
Mhm.
and creative people
Well, now the
than
introduction of AI and being able to use, Chat GPT and tools that can
right.
create content, but then where is it pulling that information from, and who gets, credit for the copyright at that point, which is a whole nother a whole nother
It's
topic.
a whole other
Yeah.
thing, but it's becoming a big issue these
Yeah.
days. AI and everything, and already in Hollywood. I mean, there's so much fear about how these things could displace entire careers.
Mm. Mhm.
How you could use AI products to displace people's careers and like just substitute them and get them out of there. So those are big issues now. But in comedy, for instance, we are not yet dealing with those issues because comedians have a special relationship with their audience, especially
Mhm.
these days when we talk about what they call observational comedy,
Mm.
where you cannot the relationship is very the relationship between a comedian and their audience is very personalized
Mhm.
because you're talking about your experiences. Only you could talk about your experiences. For instance,
Right.
your what happened to you in childhood.
Mhm.
Jay Leno. You can't have a machine replicate Jay Leno in terms of Jay Leno's experiences growing up as a child or so.
Mhm.
That kind of thing.
You might have AI
So,
like replicate his chin, you know.
well, yeah, but yeah, again, it's I mean, this they had a lawsuit the other day with George Carlin's family. Some AI product,
Mm,
AI, bot tried to like, replicate what George Carlin would say if George Carlin were still alive today.
mm,
He was trying to pretend to be George Carlin, and then this bot was looking at current issues today, including some issues that arose even after George Carlin had died.
mm,
So the idea was, if George Carlin were alive, this is how George Carlin would look at these issues. So,
mhm,
George Carlin's family sues him for, invasion of privacy and
mhm,
um,
mhm.
like unauthorized use of somebody's image
Likeness.
and things. And so they won an injunction to, prohibit, the continuation of, that show.
Right.
So, I mean, comedians were very excited because, it was like the very first, one of the big situations in the comedy community that gave comedians hope that if these things were ever to come up, that they could easily beat it back.
Mhm.
Unlike the experiences with Hollywood people and things. So
Right.
comedians feel that they are sitting pretty with these things.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, okay, Carl, let's share with our audience how they can get your book, how they can get a hold of you. You've got lots of good knowledge, especially for our comedian audience. If we have people who are comedians, they need to know what you have to offer to them because I think that they need to tread lightly in some of those areas.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, so again, I wrote this book like as a service to the community, comedy, and then people who are not even comedians. I
Hmm.
mean, I have situations here involving non-comedians, people who are married to comedians, or people who, if a comedian is a judge, a case I have here where a comedian is actually a judge,
Oh,
people were not comfortable with the comedian being a judge because they thought he would be biased against them if they came to his court.
uh-huh.
Now the case went all the way to the Supreme Court of New Jersey, and I won't tell them how it ended, but it's funny. They'd have to read the book,
Yeah.
read the book to find out. But I have so many cases like that. Anyways, but the book is a service to the comedy industry and to people who are not comedians,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that's why it has a lot of stories in it to entertain them as well as teach them about the First Amendment today and how the creative community and people who get into things of that nature could stay safe
Hmm.
within the law and to make them proud to be Americans or to be living in America because this place is way better. They are more protected than other societies that I just
Hmm.
mentioned when it comes to free speech and creative endeavors. So yeah, and so you can get this book. It's called Comedy Goes to Court. When people stop laughing and start fighting,
Hmm.
you can get it on Amazon, obviously,
Hmm.
or you can get it at a bookstore if you ask for the book by name. Comedy Goes to Court. When people stop laughing and start fighting, and
Hmm.
it's all for $17 tops, or
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
$5, depending on where you get the
Yeah.
book. And if you want to read the blog that I mentioned,
Hmm.
you can go to. It's called Ocar's Law. OCARLSLAW. OCarslaw.com, and read so much of this stuff on the blog, including things that are not just about law and comedy. General stuff
Hmm.
about the comedy space more broadly and our culture and other things of that nature. So yeah, so go to the blog, read more of these stories, but get the book. If you're a comedian, this book has been described as a must read for comedians and a should read for the rest of
Yeah.
us, given the discussions about entertainment and the First Amendment and other good stuff in here. So, yeah, I want them to take the book in that spirit, both as an entertainment and as a teaching tool for our contemporary society today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Carl, for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge in what you do as a journalist and as a lawyer in New York. Thank you again for coming on the show and giving us these wonderful little stories that you had for us.
I appreciate it, Reed. Thank you for having me. And yeah, be well. And I hope your audiences like it and check it out. and it'll be interesting to see what they think. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for those of you listening, the best thing that you can do for Carl and I is share this with others that you know that need to hear what Carl had to say, especially those comedian friends and people who are surrounded by comedians and content creators, because it applies to all of us. Thanks again, Carl.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Until next time, everybody, enjoy your marketing journey.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Expedition podcast. Want to continue the journey? Don't miss out on new episodes. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Wouldn't it be great if there was one place you can go to get all the latest information and tips about marketing and advertising? The Marketing Expedition community is that place. People like you gather in our online community to build relationships with others and find the latest marketing trends, tactics, tools, and technology. We help you build your brand and your bottom line. Start your adventure today. Visit themarketingexpedition.com to find out more.